Okay, so tonight I've been asked to talk about the religious aspect of the vaccine tonight, and I really feel like that to talk about the religious aspect of the vaccine, we have to talk about religious freedom. So for most of you guys religious out here tonight? I'm just going to see a show of hands. If you're not, you don't have to raise your hand. Okay, most religious people. Okay, good. So I just want to make sure I'm speaking to the right crowd tonight, okay? Because I have been booed out of stadiums before. No, I'm just kidding. Not too bad. But tonight, religious freedom by definition it's the right to live, speak, and act according to your beliefs peacefully and publicly. It protects your ability to be yourself at work, at home, at school, and at social activities. Religious freedom basically is more than just the freedom to worship at home or at school or at work or at a place of worship. Religious freedom states that you don't have to go against your core values and your core beliefs in order to conform to a culture or to a government. So religious liberty or freedom basically is your right to freedom of conscience. It's your right to the freedom of belief, to believe however you want to believe whoever you want to believe, and to practice that belief. That is the core quintessential definition of religious freedom. And our Constitution was written to protect the right of religious freedom in the United States of America. If you look at the First Amendment, it is written and it says this. It says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And what that basically means is that Congress does not have the right to establish a state religion nor dictate what religion you must be a part of. The reason why they wrote this into the Bill of Rights is because they came from a form of tyrannical government in England where the Anglican Church, the Church of England, was forcing their belief system on the people. And when they came to this nation, they did not want to be told how to believe or who to believe or what way to practice their beliefs. They wanted the freedom to choose the way that they worshiped, the way that they thought, the way that they believed. And so it was very important to the framers of our Constitution that they wrote into the Bill of Rights that Congress would never mandate a state religion. So let me just put this statement out there in the free and the clear right now. It is illegal for Congress to mandate a state religion in this country. It is against the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We will never have a state religion. We cannot have one mandated by government because we wrote that out, that it would never be a possibility when we wrote the Constitution. Now, the next thing we need to define is what is religion by definition. By definition, religion is a particular set of faith and worship or a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance. A personal set or institutionalized system of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices, or scrupulous conformity. My favorite part of the definition is that last part, scrupulous conformity. The way that you know that you're practicing a religion is that you are scrupulously conforming to a set of beliefs. You are scrupulously conforming to a value system. You are scrupulously conforming to your conscience and the way that you feel as a human being. That's how you know that you are practicing a form of religion, okay? Now, what the federal government is doing right now is that they are now forcing a particular set of attitudes, beliefs, and practices on the American public with scrupulous conformity. And they are, by definition, acting as an institutionalized religion. Okay, I see that some of y'all don't believe me. That's okay. I'm going to prove my point. So we're going to look at what religious institutions do. What do religious institutions do? Religious institutions are the visible and organized manifestations of practices and beliefs in particular social and historical context. Like human emotions and attitudes, religious beliefs and practices project outward onto the social and historical plan of society. So the first thing that you notice about religious institutions is that they project outward onto the people what their core belief system is. And they put that onto the people that are around them in that religious institution. Religious institutions create identities and representation and determine attitudes, emotions, and behavior. I'm going to say that one last time. They create identities and representations, and they determine attitudes, emotions, and behavior. Now tell me that this does not sound like scrupulous conformity. You will shut down your business, and you will shut down your church, or you will be faced with a fine or go to jail. Sounds scrupulous to me. You will wear a face mask and social distance, or else you will not be allowed to mix and to mingle with the public. Sounds like they're projecting a set of values on the public to me, which is what a religious institution does. You will limit your social gatherings at birthdays, weddings, and funerals, and holidays to a certain number of people, or not be allowed to hold your gathering. If you have more than a certain amount of people, you will not be allowed to gather. Or here's the best one. You will take the COVID vaccination, or else not be allowed to fly on an airplane, go to school, or even hold a job. That sounds like a religious institution with the set of values and ideals and conformities that is being pushed upon the public around that institution. Okay? And if you really follow the train of thought all the way out to what this institution, which is our federal government being the main institutor of the institution right now, if you play this all the way out, where we're headed with this is that if you do not conform to our religious belief system in this country that the federal government is putting out there, you will be rounded up and placed into isolation camps away from vaccinated people. You're like, that will never happen in America. Have you studied your history? Anybody besides me, a history buff that loves World War II, Nazi Germany history? Okay, I watch Nazi Germany history and read it all day long, every day. This is exactly what they did under the reign of Hitler in World War II and World War I, is they rounded up the nonconformists. They rounded up those that did not want to be a part of the Third Reich. They rounded up the people that did not conform or fit into the religious institution of the government of the Third Reich, and they placed them in isolation camps, later to be known as concentration camps, later to be known as gas chambers, to isolate them away from those that were considered pure Aryan blood of the Aryan nation. Now, they were using blood identification back during Nazi Germany to do this. Now we're using it under the guise of it's what's best for your body and best for your health. Because doesn't the government know what's best for your health and for your body? You don't know what's best, right? It makes practical sense because for years they've been telling parents that we don't know how to raise our kids the best way, so shouldn't the state be our parents' parents? Be our kids' parents and our parents' nanny? So for years, I feel like what's been happening is we're the boiling frog in the water syndrome. We've been going down this path for many, many years, and now we're getting to the point of the government is saying that we have control over your body. You don't have control over your body or your choices. To me, that is an institutionalized religion. So the federal government is right now, by its own definition, violating its own Constitution and Bill of Rights. Because anytime you force someone to do something against their conscience, you are enforcing a set of attitudes, beliefs, and practices on them, which is by definition an exercise in religion. So we could say it like this: the United States government has become the state religion, has become the church, has become religious institutions of the day. That's what we're dealing with. So let's talk about the solution. Now that we know the problem, what is the solution? So I always go back to the founding documents because I believe that our founding framers were very wise and they knew what they were doing when they framed this republic. So to understand why the Constitution was written, you must first understand why was the Declaration of Independence written. Why was it necessary for us to declare independence? Okay? So let's look at the Declaration for a second. The Declaration starts off by saying, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands by which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. The entire reason for America's independence is stated very clearly in the very first paragraph of the Declaration. The framers said that independence was necessary because the political structure that they were under, which at that time was the government of England, went against the laws of nature and nature's God. It all started with that premise. We have to declare independence because the form of government that we are under goes against the laws of nature and nature's God. What are the laws of nature and nature's God? Well, the laws of nature and nature's God are the rules of moral conduct implanted by nature in the human mind, forming the proper basis for and being superior to all written laws, the will of God revealed to man through his conscience. See, we all have conscience. We all have a conscience. God wired us with a conscience. God wired us with the ability to accept a higher power, to receive a supernatural guidance from a higher power. It's called the conscience of man. And so what we understand from the first paragraph of the Declaration and from this statement is that the reasons why the framers felt it was necessary to dissolve the political bands with their form of government was because the form of government that they were under went against their freedom of conscience. When a government is telling you that you have to do something against your human will, it is going against the laws of nature and nature's God. Because it is implying itself upon your conscience, which is given to you by God, and it is usurping the place of God and becoming the conscience for you in the place of the conscience that God gave you. Sound familiar to what we're facing right now in this nation? It does to me. Second of all, the second paragraph states this: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The second thing that they understood was that our rights do not come from government, our rights come from God. Our rights do not come from government, because if your rights come from government, then government can take away your rights. But if your rights come from God, only God can take away your rights. And God, we know from Scripture that God has already given man a free will, and He's not going to take our will away, which is what entitles us to those rights, is the fact that we get to choose. So what's happening right now is we are living under a form of government where the government acts like the rights that we have come from them and not from nature and nature's God. And they have moved into the role of God, telling us what we can and cannot do, what we can and cannot think, and what we must put into our bodies, or else. Or else. Number 3, the next line in the Declaration says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So what that means is that the rights by which we are governed are only given to the government by the consent of the governed. In other words, we have to give permission to our government to rule us the way that we want to be ruled. The whole premise of the Declaration is based on the fact that we're only going to allow a republic if it is a representative form of government that represents the will of we, the people. So our government today acts like they derive their power from themselves and not from the people. They make laws and issue executive orders that are not only without the consent of the governed, they are opposed to the consent of the governed. Why? Because they don't understand that their power does not come from their own ability to give themselves power. All power comes from God Himself, but they don't acknowledge God. So therefore they usurp the authority and the power of God, and then they become God. And that's what's happening in our nation today. So here comes the answer in the next line. What is the answer to all of this? It is this. It says that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. You see, I think we're getting dangerously close to this point in our history at this point right now. I believe we are witnessing a destructive form of government that does not uphold our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or the right to worship God with our own conscience. And Big Brother and Big Tech and mainstream media are now acting as the collective conscience of Americans. Big Tech is your conscience. Mainstream media is your conscience. Whatever the government says, that is your conscience. And that's why I believe the government has become destructive, is because they're telling us what to do, they're telling us what not to do, they're telling us how to think, how to behave, and basically they are forcing their will upon us, when our government actually is the other way around. It's our will forced upon them. They're supposed to do what we tell them to do, not what they tell us to do. That is the true form of a republic form of government. So lastly, I want to just bring up this last part of the Declaration. There are parameters that we should consider when throwing off our form of government. The next line states very clearly, and listen, prudence indeed will dictate that government long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. In other words, it is the human nature within all man that we endure and that we bear and that we go through hardship and that we put up with a lot of stuff. We go through a lot of things and put up with a lot of stuff on this earth, okay? But they recognize there comes a point where enough is enough. And it says, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object, in other words, we all feel the same way. It's not just a handful of Americans, it's a lot of Americans feeling the same way. When we all feel the same object, it evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. See, I think this is what we must now consider as a nation, is we have to say, has the long train of abuses and usurpations led to absolute despotism, or is there still some sliver of hope that our nation will turn back to some form of a republic? This is what is weighing in the balance on the American conscience today, at least in my circles where I run. This is what we think. Because if our government decides that it no longer wishes to be a republic, then the only choice for us, we the people, is to throw off such government and provide a new guard for our future security. Unless we just want to be a communist country. Can I ask by a show of hands, who has ever visited the Soviet bloc before the Iron Curtain fell? 1, 2, 3. 3 people. 4 people. 4 people visited the Soviet bloc before the Iron Curtain fell. I visited Russia in 1997, Latvia, Lithuania, also traveled to communist China, spent a lot of time over in Thailand and the Burmese wars during the 1990s and the 2000s, got a chance to travel most of the world. What I will tell you is that what I saw over in Russia in the 90s before the Iron Curtain fell, and I haven't been there since 97, so it may be different today, but under totalitarian government and communism, because Americans, by and large, and especially the youth of our nation, have never traveled to these communist countries. Let me tell you something. You don't want that form of government. You don't want that lifestyle. You don't want that kind of economy. You don't want that kind of culture. Because it is destructive. It lowers everyone down to the lowest common denominator. It makes everybody equally ignorant. So that basically we produce everything for one purpose, and that is to feed the government itself so that the government stays in power and control over the proletariat, and so that we basically are slaves to the system. We were never meant to be slaves to any system. We're not created to be slaves. Slavery is foreign to human nature. God did not make us to be slaves. If you study humanity and how God made us to be free. We crave freedom. We love freedom. We love freedom of choice because God gave us a free will. Nobody wants to be a slave. So if our government wants to go down the path of communism, and this is what they want America to be, I'm sorry, but I choose to throw off the yoke of tyranny of government. I choose to dissolve the bands of government and form a new government to secure my life, liberty, and form of happiness, and for future generations, I will stand and fight with the last breath of my lungs to make sure that we never become Russia or China or a communist nation. I will conclude by saying this. In the meantime, what do we need to do? In the meantime, what do we need to do? Here's what I suggest that we do. I suggest that we throw off tyranny in any way that we can, at any level that is possible. I suggest that we refuse to take the shot. Refuse. Okay? By refusing, you're standing up to tyranny. You're saying, I will not be governed. I will not do something against my conscience, against the laws of nature and nature's God. I would refuse to bow to tyrannical decrees. I would refuse to do the things that the government is trying to force us to do. And I think the best thing that we can do right now is stand together united for liberty and freedom and justice in this nation. And I think the more of us that stand up together, it doesn't, people think that it's going to take millions and millions of Americans to do this. I would propose that it just takes a minority of on fire, awake, outraged people who are willing to light the brush fires of awakening and revival across this land One thing you need to know about God in Scripture is that God always looks for the remnant. He never looks for the masses to work with. He just needs a small population of tired, irate people who refuse to go along to get along and stand up with others that will do the same. That's all it takes to shift an entire nation back to a republic and a we the people form of government. Thank you for this time. I appreciate the presentation.